Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets. Here with a preview of this weekend's Martha Washington Stakes and Southwest Stakes taking place at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. This is, of course, a Kentucky Oaks and a Kentucky Derby prep race. I'm going to be joined by the voice of Oaklawn Park, Matt Dinerman, here in a few seconds, so make sure to stick around. But before we get to Matt and these two races, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. We have race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. Just this week, we have plenty of content on the Pegasus World Cup card. Obviously, we're talking Oaklawn right now, but we also have a lot of forward-facing content looking at the trail to the 2025 Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. Well, as I mentioned, I wanted to bring on the man who is the voice of Oaklawn Park, as well as Monmouth Park, but I want to bring on Matt Dinerman here. And Matt, thank you so much for joining me on what's going to be a really fun weekend down at Oaklawn with an Oaks and Derby prep race.
Matthew, always fun to chat with you. And yeah, we're really excited here at Oaklawn. 12 races on Saturday. That's Southwest Day, early first post 11:25. And of course, you mentioned it, our feature, a big Derby points race here, the Southwest.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to see a little bit of sunshine to your one side. And it looks like we're going to have fast conditions on Saturday, which honestly, most of the country can't claim because half the Southeast feels like it's under snow right now. I know Fairgrounds is struggling with that. And, we always have our weather issues up here in New York as well. So excited for, dry, fast track on Saturday for these races. And let's dive into the very first one, which is the Martha Washington, which is a Kentucky Oaks prep race going a mile and a 16th for those 3-year-old fillies. Matt, this is a short field, only 6, but long on talent, I would say. You have a horse like Quietside, who has been chasing around some Brad Cox monsters these last couple of tries out. You have Whit Beckman coming off a win last week in the Silver Bullet Day with one of his fillies, now trying to come back-to-back weekends with Her Laugh. And you got Kenny McPeak with Take Charge Milady, who also looked to have a little bit of a breakthrough last time out. Interested in some of your thoughts? You've got to see some of these horses as they've run at Oaklawn, and curious what you see from them in this type of a race.
Well, I think Quietside certainly the one to beat. Obviously, I haven't seen her at Oaklawn yet. That'll change on Saturday. A grade 1 placed filly that's done nothing but good work. Unfortunately, she's been a bridesmaid to, as you mentioned, Immersive and Good Cheer, amongst others that are just really top-class 3-year-old fillies in the division. And this is a class drop here. I mean, she's the one to beat. She freshens up a couple months. Don't think that'll be a problem at all. Johnny Ortiz trains his trainees pretty aggressively to where they stay fit. My top pick, actually, here, I really like Gowell's Delight, number 5 for Kenny McPeak. Kenny, when he wins first time out with a 2-turn horse, that means they can run. And this horse won for fun. Now, she was 14-1. And as a handicapper, I'll look at that. I scratch my head because I say, well, was she not well meant because she was 14-1? That's a little bit of a concern, but I think the price will be right. And on top of that, last week, Kenny McPeak debuted a winner at the Fairgrounds named Hypnus. And I had heard about 3 or 4 weeks earlier that Hypnus was one of the better 3-year-olds in the barn. They were very high on this horse, and he went off at 15-1. So he was a well-kept secret, and he ended up winning. So I'm not that concerned with Gowell's Delight being 14-1 last time out. I thought her race was terrific. I think there's room for her to grow. And I actually think Kenny's got a really strong 1-2 punch because Take Charge My Lady, she's getting better. Unlike Gowell's Delight, who won first out, Take Charge My Lady took her a race or two to figure out what the deal was, but her last race was very, very good. She's a very athletic-looking filly. I thought she had a lot more left in the tank when she broke her maiden here at Oaklawn earlier in the month. So I think Take Charge My Lady's an interesting contender. I believe Her Laugh is very beatable. I'm going to try to beat her. I thought she got everything her own way on the lead last time, and both Golden Gamble and California Sunset, who ran 2nd and 3rd to her in that stake, have both come back to lose since then. They haven't won coming back. So I think Her Laugh's going to have to deal with some pressure from the outside by Legal Empress. And I think Adira, even number 2, the last one we'll talk about, she is one that got a bad trip in her last race. And I'll take the stand and say if she got a good trip, she might have been able to win that day. This is a tougher field, but she's the trip play out of anybody in this race because she did not get a good trip. So I think there are angles to go with pretty much every filly in this race. And I think it's very competitive. And as you mentioned, I think even though it's a smaller field, it's deep.
I couldn't agree more with your analysis too. Goals Delight was a horse that really jumped off the page to me as well. Kenny, as you mentioned, not necessarily known for getting horses ready first time out. So when they do win in debut, that's always something that's quite notable. And you're still getting a good price, which I think is sometimes you don't see that a lot of times. If a horse wins at 14-1, second time out, next thing you know, they're 3-1, 2-1. But because they're facing stakes competition here, you're still getting a really nice price on Goal's Delight. And I think it's a good opportunity to try to play a horse like that. And the other thing that I think is notable about that trip was that it was a really professional effort in that it was a tracking trip. It wasn't one of these maiden wins where you go, well, it was gate to wire, kind of got everything her own way. One of those where you go, well, there's probably going to be a little bit of regression. The fact she showed the ability to rate, pass horses, sit a really professional trip, like you said, going 2 turns, I think certainly bodes well for her opportunities moving forward. And Quietside, listen, always the bridesmaid. She's just going to be a really short price from a betting standpoint in this sort of a spot, but certainly would be no surprise to see Johnny Ortiz get her trained up and ready for this spot. And, as you mentioned, immersive, good cheer. Those 2 horses combined are a perfect 8 for 8. So running second and third to the 2 of them, not a bad thing, but
No.
and I noticed a very similar thing with Her Laugh as well, which was Golden Gamble, who ran second, came back to really not run much of a race in the Silver Bullet Day last week at Fairgrounds. So that was a little bit of a concern. And you also saw a little bit of a buyer speed figure regression from Her Laugh second start out, and she'd have to kind of move forward. So, I think you and I are on the same page in terms of where to look for value, certainly in this race in terms of Goel's Delight. But going to be a lot of fun to see this field of 6 face off against each other. And the early pace dynamics will be interesting, as you pointed out, with Her Laugh, Legal Empress, maybe a couple of others trying to get their nose up there towards the front. So should be a fun one, though, going 2 turns there for the Kentucky Oaks points. Now, shifting over to the boys, we got a field of 10 for the Southwest Stakes, a grade 3, again going a mile and a 16th for the 3-year-old Colts. And we have 2 out-of-towners coming in as your 2 favorites, Gaming and Patch Adams. And Gaming obviously coming in for Bob Baffert, who was back on the Kentucky Derby trail after that lengthy suspension from Churchill Downs. And Juan Hernandez jumps aboard this one, who was, of course, the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. You have Patch Adams, who lost in debut, but then looked absolutely dazzling second start out, just romping over maiden competition. But I think there's some other interesting horses, a horse like Sandman, a horse like American Promise, even a horse like Tiz-tastic. I think there's some other fascinating runners in this race. Interested in your thoughts on this one, Matt, and kind of where your eye took you when looking at the past performances.
Well, I watched Patch Adams's race, which was pretty spectacular, really, when he broke his maiden. And I actually watched him work on XBTV with a horse named Hit Show, who won the Louisiana Stakes last week. And Patch Adams just toyed with Hit Show in that workout. Now, Hit Show is inside of Patch Adams, but I'm a big workout guy if I can get those videos. And that tells me that this horse really is uber talented. He's always been well regarded. I'm not looking for a Kentucky Derby winner here, Matthew. I'm looking for who's going to win the Southwest. And I think this mile and a 16th won't be a problem. I think he's very good. It's hard to tell. I mean, my friend Cody, he's a good friend of mine. He brought up Nash from last year.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted to try to beat Patch Adams. I mean, Nash was a horse that broke his maiden. I believe he got a 97 buyer. Then he came back at 2-5 and lost. And he ended up winning a stake here at Oaklawn last year late in the meet, but he never really turned out to be like some people thought he would be. So there is some questions as to what has Patch Adams beaten at Churchill Downs? How's he going to take the 2 turns? What's it going to be like for him going to the stakes competition? But everything I've seen, this horse is the real deal here. And on the contrary, I think Gaming, who's the 2-1 morning line favorite, I don't think he's going to go off favorite, but I do believe that he is very much a bet against. This horse, I thought, got a perfect trip in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, was second best. He ran fine. He ran really well, but he got a perfect trip to win, and he didn't. And last time out in the Los Alamitos Futurity, there were no excuses, and he just flat out ran a C- race. Not sure what happened there, but I think Patch Adams is the better horse, and I prefer Sandman over Gaming. I think Sandman's a horse that's always had ability, but he's one of these goofy tappets that it takes him a while to figure things out. And that last race was the first time where he put 2 and 2 together. He put everything all together. He got a good trip. He wasn't that green. He showed a nice acceleration. He ran a good horse down who wasn't stopping. This horse simply ran him down, and he's going to like the added 16th of a mile. And I think Sandman has a lot of upside. So if I'm playing multi-race wagers, for example, I'm using Patch Adams, probably using Sandman on some tickets, and I'm just sort of going like that, and that's who I like.
I love it. No, Patch Adams, super impressive. And that's a great tidbit about him working with Hit Show, who looked so good last week, winning that Louisiana Stakes. So that's obviously very impressive to be working with that sort of a company. And like you, I'm against gaming in this spot. I just have not been thoroughly impressed by this horse. I know the horse won the Del Mar Futurity, like you said, ran second in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but I just am not a big fan of Game Winner as a sire. I mean, I think right now the numbers are 1 for 22 in dirt routes from his offspring.
Wow.
So it's one of those where I just don't really trust him stretching out. And there's also a little bit of the jockey politics too. Flavian Pratt, who rode gaming 2 of the last 3 times out, hops off this horse to ride Patch Adams, who he's never ridden before. Always jockeyed by Florent Giroux. Juan Hernandez, who hasn't ridden gaming since debut, now comes east for Bob Baffert. Obviously, a very familiar face in the Baffert barn in terms of bringing Hernandez to Oaklawn and having him ride. But still thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic to take a look at. And yeah, Sandman was a horse I got to see up close and personal this summer at Saratoga. Got to make plenty of Metallica references in my tweets about his victory. He was, you're right. He is that kind of goofy tappet. Just had a ton of talent in debut. One of the many Mark Casse 2-year-olds last year who really looked good at Saratoga. And you're right, last time out really looked the part. And you could tell, okay, now they kind of have figured things out. Now we're going to step back up into Graded Stakes Company and give this another go. I do want to just very quickly mention the D. Wayne Lucas horse, American Promise, because in a lot of ways he fits the profile of a horse we saw run last week for D. Wayne, Innovator, who ran third in that Lecomte Stakes as a horse that took a long time to break its maiden, has faced against good competition, and finally broke through with a victory last time out, admittedly over a muddy sealed track in a gate-to-wire fashion. But that was kind of the same MO that Innovator had. And Innovator came back to run a really good race. So, Wayne runs his horses into shape, and sometimes it takes 5-6 starts for them to find their best stride. And American Promise, certainly a 6-1, maybe presents a little bit of value. But like you, I very much am interested in Sandman, I think, as a value play if you're going to try to beat one, if not both of the top 2 in this race. And I guess the final horse I'll just give a mention to, I don't know how good this horse is, but you got to see the horse that beat him last time out, which is Speed King, who's coming out of that Springboard Mile, who lost to Cole Battle, who looked so impressive winning the Smarty Jones at Oaklawn. That was a really cool race, and it was great to see the connections of Cole Battle get that big win on the Derby Trail. But Speed King, obviously coming out of that Springboard Mile, is going to have a lot of hard work breaking from that far outside post, and is going to have to try to stretch out to that extra 16th that he wasn't able to hold off Cole Battle on last time. So kind of up against it, but still interesting to see, I think, how he runs in this particular race.
I want to note something about American Promise, Matthew, which is a very interesting deal when you look at speed figures. This is a speed figure note. He got a big buyer at 95, but I think he got like a 16 or a 17 on the rags, which is not a good number. So this is rare to see that big of a discrepancy with a horse that on the daily racing form page, for example, looks like he ran a huge race, when on the rags, if you're a rags player, you're saying this horse didn't run fast at all. So it'll be very interesting to see how American Promise does in this race. And someone's wrong on this. He either ran a good race or he didn't. So I thought that was very interesting because, as you know, pretty much everybody that uses paper and looks at past performances, they have some sort of speed figure that they like to help analyze how fast a horse ran. And that's a big useful tool, as useful of a tool as we've seen in horse racing, depending on what your preferred speed figures are that you look at. So I thought that was really interesting. The 2 sheets that have the most prominence in terms of the industry with regards to trying to predict how fast a horse ran, very big discrepancy with this horse.
Hey, that's a great point. And I'll also add to that to say the number 2 horse Publisher is coming out of that same race, ran second to American Promise, and Publisher ran nowhere near the buyer speed figure that was assigned and earned by him in that race. So you saw a massive jump up in buyer speed figure there, which makes me very skeptical of that last figure. Though I will say Timeform US also had that race very fast as well. And in fact, I think Timeform US gave Patch Adams and American Promise the same number for their last races. They both got 111s. So, I don't know, but I'm like you. I'm rather skeptical of that last number. And I think there's going to be a regression to the mean for both of those horses, both Publisher and for American Promise. So that's one that, especially if American Promise takes any sort of money, at 6-1 or lower, I'm just not really interested. Horse floats up to 8-1, 10-1, sure. Then might be a little bit interested in that. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot of buzz around Patch Adams, and I think that horse is going to end up probably going off as your post-time favorite. So going to be a lot of fun, though, Matt. And this is an exciting field. You said you got 12 race card, but you got a lot of other racing going on at Oaklawn all week and for the next couple of months.
We do. I mean, obviously, we had some weather issues ourselves a couple weeks back. So what we have done is we have a 4-day race week this coming week, Thursday through Sunday. And then next week, we're also going to have Thursday through Sunday racing. Yeah. So we've got 4 racing days the next 2 weeks. And we're really excited about that. As everybody knows, Hot Springs, Arkansas, it's a town for horse racing during the winter. People love it here. So we're excited to get those horses back on the track, big fields, competitive racing, and a lot of good racing. And if you're in the area, by the way, we're giving out a Mystic Dan bobblehead on Southwest Day. The winner of the Southwest last year, he gets his own bobblehead.
Pretty good stuff. I got to talk to somebody down at Oaklawn to get me one of those. So
you may know a guy, wink.
Exactly. Well, that sounds like a blast. And I'm glad you guys are expanding to 4 days the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks. And we should mention you can also catch a lot of the racing on Oaklawn at America's Day at the Races on FS1 or FS2. So we always have a lot of coverage up here for covering New York, but also covering Oaklawn. So make sure to check that out. Make sure to listen to Matt's calls, give him a follow. And Matt, thank you again for joining me this afternoon to talk about these races this coming weekend. And best of luck calling them this weekend.
Thanks, Matthew. Great to be on with you.
All right. Thank you so much also for watching and tuning in. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button on NYRA Bets YouTube today. For Matt Dinerman, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you folks, it's now post time.